Hi guys, welcome back to Homeschooling with Classic Stories. We are still on Peter Rabbit, so this is sort of the second part video to explain to you what else we did for other subjects. So I'm going to start by showing you what we did for art. So talking about art, my son, we just bought him a very cheap notebook. Um, I think we picked this up at like a dollar store or something. It wasn't expensive. The important thing is that it is empty. So it doesn't have any lines to it. It's just an empty book. So we just stuck his name on it. I wrote his age. You'll notice this says age 4. He did not just start that book. In fact, we're like halfway through, almost. So he was using this for preschool as well. Um, but basically, what it is he does a drawing in it that goes with each week. I will say, I guess I'm promoting another YouTube channel, which is fine, without their permission. But basically, we use the YouTube channel Art Hub for Kids, and I just pick a topic, or I ask him to pick a topic from the week, and I just type that into Art Hub for Kids and then whatever the item is, and they literally have everything drawn. So that's what we use. He's done some really nice drawings. This one is not relevant to Beatrix Potter. This is something he just wanted to draw, and I thought it was really nice. But this is the one that he drew for this week. So he just did a rabbit. And basically, it's just a step by step. It's a man and a child, and they draw side by side. You'll need markers. Um, they actually do marker, like a black marker, like a Sharpie, and then crayons, but I just let him do markers all the way through because I think it's a little easier. I do sit next to him the whole time he is doing it because he's using markers. And even though he's been using markers for about a year now, he still has a tendency, I think most kids do, like he'll start laughing at a joke that the guy tells or the child tells, and he'll kind of wave it around. So you might want to sit next to your child while they're using markers. We have a lot of marker on our couch as a result of this, but what can you do? So anyway, this is the rabbit that he drew this week. He wanted to do a rabbit since it was Peter Rabbit. The coloring was just his idea. Um, so this is art time. So let your child do whatever it is. I do keep a piece of paper behind it while he's drawing. So while he's drawing, it actually just looks like this so that he's not making a mess onto the other pages. But that's all it is. And it's really, really a nice thing to have. So, like at the end of all this, I'm going to have a little book that's just his art from when he was 4 years old. And I think that's lovely. I will say that I am probably going to give this as a Christmas gift this year to one of the grandparents. Um, so keep that in mind is that this is also kind of a nice treasure to have, like a full year of art. So anyway, so you'll just need markers and this and YouTube access, which I guess you already have. The other thing that we do as far as kind of social studies exploration is social studies in pre-K is really meant to be community helpers based. So when we did the baking in the last video, we talked about bakers, and when we were out on walks and stuff, we have a dog. So when we were out on walks and stuff, I pointed out bake shops and the things that they were making inside. We do live in a city. I don't think I've mentioned that before, but whenever we passed by a bake shop, I would point out this person is a baker. What do they make? What do they do? And we took a look at inside some bakeries. The other thing that we looked at was farming. Um, it is not terribly clear to me whether Mr. McGregor is a farmer, but I chose that he should be a farmer only because of the toys that we have. So one of the toys, I'm going to show you this to you. It's very loud. I apologize. My mother gave this to the boys for Christmas one year, maybe last year, maybe the year before. It's like a Fisher Price little farm set. And so all that I did for this, in order to promote talking about farming, was I left this out on the kitchen table. They went to bed, And then while they were asleep, I left this out on the kitchen table. I also gathered up, so like these are the little Fisher Price pieces that go with it. There's a lot of little animals. There's little foods to feed the animals. But I also gathered up anything that I felt was kind of farming, gardening related. So like this is like a little carrot that came from daycare. We don't really have play food. If we did, that would have gone out. Um, the play food has largely been destroyed. So right now we don't really have any play food, but that would have been really good to have out. This also came from my youngest daycare. So this isn't really something, I suppose you could make this some like little fencing. And this came from their daycare as well, like a little watering can. So they played with this, as well as I also made sure I left out a stuffed rabbit so that they could reenact Peter Rabbit to the extent that they wanted in their own time. This was very, very undirected play. Literally just left it on all these things on the kitchen table, and they saw it in the morning and were delighted by it and played with it for a really long time. And um, my 4.5 year old told my 2.5 year old the story of Peter Rabbit very loosely. And so they just sort of played that way. And it was really nice and lovely. I saw on a blog one time, an unschooling blog, that this is called strewing. I like that term, so that's probably what you'll hear me refer to this as, but just sort of unstructured play around the topic that I kind of want to get to. The other things we did to talk about gardening, we do not have a garden. Again, we live in a city. In fact, we live in sort of like the top floor of a building. We do have some outdoor space where I grow tomatoes, blueberries, basil, like in containers. So we talked about that as gardening and like ways that he's seen the garden transition. The tomatoes were really great because where we are, we're currently in summer. So we saw some tomatoes that were green and some flowers and some larger tomatoes that were turning red. And so we talked a little bit about the process of that. None of this has a worksheet to it. It's sort of just you imparting knowledge and talking to your child about the thing. If you don't have any toys that are gardening related or play food, or I know a lot of people enjoy travel schooling or world schooling. In that case, you're not really going to have much of these things that I just mentioned, and that's fine. A great way to do this same thing to talk about gardening would be simply to take some fruits and vegetables from out of your fridge, leave them on the table, tell your child, hey, look, you could make a garden, and have them set up their own garden. That is more directive than obviously what I did. If you have access to a rabbit or you just cut out a little rabbit, you could do it pretty much the same effect without having to have access to any sort of toys if you don't have any toys because you're traveling. So the last thing that I wanted to mention was what we did for letters this week. Um, my son does already know his letters and he knows the letter sounds. So this is the worksheet that we did. So I just made this worksheet to go along. You'll see the little Peter Rabbit at the bottom. That's how you know it was for this week. So the word study that we did was on the word rabbit. This sort of looks like I'm doing sight words. It's not really that. It's more I wanted to pick a word for us to study the letters in. So this isn't like he has to memorize the word rabbit or anything. But basically all that he did, you see that it has directions on it. I presume you will have to read these directions to your child. So I did sit with him while he was doing this whole activity. So all that I did was prompt him, hey, could you circle the R's? Could you square the A's? And so I just prompted him with it. There are 4 of each letter if your child finds that helpful. But just going through and finding all of the items within it. To promote some letter awareness, be sure that you point out, like, if your child doesn't know the differences. So, like, whether you want to say capital letters or uppercase letters, lowercase letters, make sure you point out the difference if your child is still not aware of those. The other thing to point out is the letter sounds. So, like, just while he was making the circles around the R, oh, what sound does the R make? And he would go, you know, so just practicing that. And then at the end, I did have him sound out the word in a very basic way. So like b, I, and then we just sort of blended it together. This is not, just for clarity, my husband and I are both teachers, so just for clarity, this is not real phonics teaching. This is sort of to introduce the skills. So I don't want you to think that your child is suddenly going to start reading. If they do start reading, that's great. But your child is probably not going to suddenly start reading as a result of doing things like this. Um, but this is a really great precursor to get them comfortable with the idea of letters and their sounds and the idea that they're kind of being squished together or rubber banded together or however you choose to call this idea. Okay, this is the one that my son did. He chose a lovely blue crayon, or rather indigo crayon. He always asks me what the Crayola box says, right? So, so he chose a lovely indigo crayon, and this is the work that he did. So something that you'll notice is he did all of the things, which is, what the purpose of the activity is. But you'll notice, for example, on the letter B, he's meant to make a triangle. This isn't a triangle. But he did have the right idea. He was trying to make 1, 2, 3 strokes. Or however you teach triangles. I am not a stickler for to be this way. Um, but as long as they're getting the right sides, with the circle, as long as it's continuous, with the square, if it's in 4 parts, right? With the triangle, if it's in 3 parts, then they have the right idea. I certainly would not be a real stickler about this because you're talking about hand control, which is what they're trying to practice, but they do clearly know what it is they need to be doing. So, um, the only other thing that I would point out about this is if you want to have some counting practice, you can do some counting of the letters, how many R's, sorry, you know how many R's, A's of each letter there are. But if you want to have them count the total number of letters, we counted all of the uppercase letters and we counted all of the lowercase letters, and talked about how they were the same, and then we added them together as well for how many total letters there are. You don't have to do any of that. This activity didn't take very long at all. So if you need to fill more time, I suppose you could go and take out your Beatrix Potter book, and look for the word rabbit within the story. There's a lot of the word rabbit. But other than that, this should not be too terribly time consuming. We are going to talk about a scheduling video in the future, but just as a note, don't push it too far. When your kid is ready to stop, make sure you stop. You know. All right. Anyway, I will leave the Google Drive link down in the below part so that you can have access to this. Again, don't do anything terrible with it um, as far as distributing it, but you are welcome to make a copy of it and use it with your child. So, other than that, have a lovely week, and next week we will be starting on the Tale of Squirrel Nutkin is next week. So I will see you next week. Bye.